Shalom, shalom, and thank you for joining me today in this study titled Numbering the Sabbath. Today, we're going to talk about why the Sabbath is important, how do we find the Sabbath of our Creator, and why the Gregorian Saturday is not the true Sabbath of creation. And I'm going to talk briefly about those who try to use Wednesday as day 4 in the priestly count. So let's head straight to Ezekiel 20:12. And my Sabbaths I gave to them, to be for a mark between me and between them, for them to know that I am Eloah, the one sanctifying them. Ezekiel 20:20. And my Sabbaths, sanctify them, and it will be for a mark between me and you, to know that I am the Most High, your Eloah. Isaiah 56:2. Blessed is the man who does this, and the Son of Man who lays hold on it, keeping Sabbath from defiling it, and keeping his hand from doing every evil. The Most High Eloah informs us that the ones meeting with him at his appointed times, at his Sabbaths, are the ones who bear his mark. These are his people, of which he gives to his Son for safekeeping. John 17:11. And no longer am I in the world, yet these are in the world, and I come to you, Holy Father. Keep them in your name, those who you gave to me, that they may be one as we are. John 17:12. While I was with them in the world, I kept them in your name. I guarded those whom you gave to me, and not one of them was lost, except the son of perdition, that the scripture might be fulfilled. We have to ask then, are we given to the Messiah for safekeeping if we don't bear the mark of his Father? It is the son of perdition whose job it is to keep sinful man away from our Creator's Sabbath. Exodus 31:14 tells us, You shall keep the Sabbath thereof, for it is holy unto you. Every one that defiles it surely be put to death. Put to death because they are not one of his people, for the lack of guarding the Sabbath. This is why it is his mark. Revelation 7, verse 1. And after these things I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that wind should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on every tree. Revelation 7:2. And I saw another angel, having ascended from the rising of the sun, having the seal of the living Eloah. Notice that the angel rising from the morning sun has Yahuwah's seal, has his mark. Now we look at this word seal in the Hebrew, H2:856, and it is katham, to close up, especially to seal, to mark. A seal is a mark of delegated authority and gives the owner's name and his position. In this case, the seal of the living Eloah. A seal provides authenticity and prevents tampering. A seal serves to protect the contents. A king places his seal upon an edict to make it legal and valid. The importance attached to seals in antiquity was so essential that without one, no document was regarded as authentic. Therefore, the seal of the living Eloah authenticates his people. The Gospels tell us that we can only come to the Father through the Son, because he shields our sins from his Father's view and prevents us from being consumed in Eloah's rage. There is a reason the Son is called the Master of the Sabbath, because he was given to protect those with its mark. Now, the Hebrew word oath is usually translated as sign, but it can also mean mark, and not just any old mark, but a distinguishing mark. Now, a distinguishing mark or feature is one that makes someone or something different from similar people or things. Therefore, if we understand correctly, those who observe the Creator's Sabbath are given a distinguishing mark, which is Eloah's seal of authenticity. That seal then provides us with protection and authority over our enemies. In Revelation, the angel with Eloah's seal instructs the other four angels standing at the four corners of the earth to seal the bondsman before Yahuwah's retribution comes. And let's go to Revelation 7, verse 3. Do no harm to the earth, nor the sea, nor the trees, until we seal the bondsmen of our Eloah on their foreheads. Now, some translation use the word slave in place of bondsman or bondservant, but there is a distinct difference between the two. A slave is someone who is owned by another person and is forced to work without pay, while a bondservant is someone who has chosen to serve their master voluntarily, often as a result of a debt or commitment. The key distinction lies in the voluntary nature of the bondservant's service compared to the involuntary status of a slave. Metaphorically, this is done by nailing one's earlobe to the doorpost of their master's house. Let's go to Deuteronomy 15, starting with verse 12. If your brother, a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, is sold to you and serves you 6 years, then in the 7th year you shall let him go free from you. Okay, so this is talking about the sabbatical year. Verse 13. And when you send him out free from you, you shall not let him go away empty. You shall richly adorn him from your flock, and from your threshing floor, and from your winepress, with that which Yahuwah your Eloah has blessed you, you shall give to him. So this is symbolic of the Most High, represented by the Master, who provides for our needs in the 6th year for the upcoming sabbatical and even perhaps the Jubilee years. For he tells us in Leviticus 25:20, and when you say, what shall we eat in the 7th year? For lo, we may not sow, nor gather our increase. Then I have commanded my blessing on you in the 6th year, and it shall produce the increase for 3 years. Verse 22, and you shall sow the 8th year, and shall eat of the old crop until the 9th year. Until the coming in of its crop, you shall eat of the old. So therefore, the master provides for the servant as the Most High does for us. Continue with Deuteronomy 15, verse 15. And you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and Yahuwah your Eloah redeemed you. On account of this, I command you this thing today. And it shall be, if he says to you, I will not go out from you, because he loves you and your house, because it was good for him with you. And you shall take an awl, and shall put it through his ear, and through the doorpost, and he shall be your slave forever. You shall do so also to your slave girl. Men and women alike, if we want to be the bondsmen of the Most High, the one in the white robes before the throne, we must be bonded to his doorpost, which is his covenant. Ezekiel 20, verse 37. And I will cause you to pass under the rod, and I will bring you into the bond of the covenant. Notice that this is a bond to the covenant, not just a covenant, indicating that everyone comes under the one covenant of the Most High. Our allegiance to our Creator will be outwardly reflected in the way we live, keeping the commands, and most notably, guarding his Sabbath. Now let's go to Exodus 31, starting with verse 12. And Elohim spoke to Moses, saying, And you speak to the sons of Israel, saying, you shall keep my Sabbaths, for it is a sign between me and you for your generations, to know that I am Yahuwah, your sanctifier. And you shall keep the Sabbath, for it is holy for you. The profaners of it dying shall die, for everyone doing work on it, that soul shall be cut off from the midst of his people. Verse 15. Work may be done 6 days, and on the 7th day is a Sabbath of rest, holy to Yahuwah. Everyone doing work on the Sabbath day, dying, shall die. Now, he's not necessarily speaking of our earthly, fleshly death, because all flesh dies, but rather about our eternal, spiritual death. And this is what is important, our everlasting life. Exodus 31:16, And the sons of Israel shall observe the Sabbath, to do the Sabbath for their generations. It is a never-ending covenant. This is Yahuwah's doorpost, his never-ending covenant. Exodus 31:17. It is a sign forever between me and the sons of Israel. For in 6 days Yahuwah made the heavens and the earth, and on the 7th day he rested and was refreshed. Now Hosea 4 verse 6 says that the people of the Most High are cut off for the lack of knowledge, because they rejected the knowledge he has sent to them through his prophets. He will also reject those from being priests to him. All Yahuwah ever wanted was a nation of priests to love and serve him. But because they have forgotten his commandments, he will forget their sons. They won't be his people, and they won't be the ones he gives to his sons for safekeeping. What a sad place to be. The Sabbath is the only day mentioned in the 10 Commandments, and yet the one commandment that is most ignored by those who call themselves the faithful. If the beast has a mark, then most certainly the Most High does as well. That mark being his 7th day. John the Revelator warned us against taking the mark of the beast and the wrath of Elohim that will ensue if we do. Revelation 14, starting with verse 9. And a third angel followed them, saying in a great voice, If anyone worships the beast and its image and receives a mark on his forehead. Now, isn't that interesting? The angel coming from the sunrise was also telling the angels to mark the foreheads of the bondservants. Or on his hand, He shall also drink of the wine of the anger of Eloah, having been mixed undiluted in the cup of his wrath. And he will be tormented by fire and brimstone before the holy angels and before the Lamb. We cannot deny then the importance of the Sabbath. So therefore we need to ask, when is our Creator's seventh-day Sabbath? Now you can get as many answers to this question as people you ask. Some would say it's the Gregorian Saturday. Another would say the moon regulates the Sabbath. A Christian would tell you that it is Sunday, which is the Lord's Day, and Muslims would say Friday is the day. I've even had people tell me that every day is the Sabbath in Messiah. So what does the word of Eloah, who is the master of the Sabbath, say? So let's go to Genesis 2, starting with verse 2. And on the seventh day, Eloah completed his work which he had made. And he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And Eloah blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because he rested from all of his work on it, which Eloah had created to make. Exodus 20, verse 11. For in 6 days the Creator made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Therefore the Creator blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. So now, just looking at the face value of these scriptures, let's erase any preconceived ideas of the Sabbath we may have and examine the direct word of the Most High. Psalms 90:11. Who knows the power of your anger and how to number out his days because of the fear of your rage? We see that David is associating the fear of Eloah's rage to numbering our days correctly. If it is okay to observe the Sabbath on any other day than his original Sabbath, then why would we be warned of his wrath if not counting correctly? After all, he gave us the simplest of instructions in the very beginning of his word for numbering his Sabbath. Now, since everyone believes that their observed Sabbath is the correct one, then how do we know for sure which one is right? How do we wade through all the dogma to find the straight pathway back to Eloh's set times? We are told to approach the word with childlike eyes. So let's take a look at Genesis 1 to see what the facts bear out about that first week. Genesis 1:1, in the beginning Eloah created the heavens and earth. So how can we not believe that it could have been anything other than a manifestation of his perfection? The original creation was worthy of him as the creator of all things. Now Isaiah expressly declares that the earth was in fact not created in its chaotic state, which Genesis 1 verse 2 views it. But then a war had ensued in the heavens when Hallel, also known as Lucifer, rebelled. The Creator told his angels that they would bow down to mankind, that they would serve them. And Hallel wasn't having it. In fact, he could take the place of the Most High, and mankind could worship him instead of Yahuwah. Hallel knew if he could get men to follow his false appointed times, that this would take them away from the presence of the Most High. Just as he did with Adam and Chava, with Eve, in the garden. Convincing Chava and Adam to meet with him at his set time in order to partake of the forbidden knowledge. Instead of meeting with the Creator when his time came, Adam and Chava hid from the Most High. In Eloh's eyes, they had committed fornication and were expelled from the garden of appointed times. Isaiah 14 verse 13. For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of Eloah. Now the stars, according to Enoch, are the leaders of time, which Hillel wants to be above. I will also set upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. Now this word congregation is none other than moed, an appointment, a fixed time or season, specifically a festival. So Hillel wanted to be over the leaders of time that count and mark the Creator's feasts, but more importantly, the Sabbaths. If man isn't worshiping during the Creator's appointed times, where he is present, then man is inadvertently worshiping Lucifer, which suits him just fine. He doesn't care what time it is, as long as it isn't the correct appointed time of the Creator. Isaiah 14:14. I will ascend above the heights of the cloud. I will be like the Most High. If it wasn't important to be at the proper appointments set by the Creator, then why would Hillel work so hard to change them? If any old day will do, as long as we're doing it, then why does Hillel want to control it? Revelation 12, starting with verse 7. And there was war in heaven, Michael and his angels warring against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels warred, but did not prevail, nor was a place found for them in heaven any more. And the great dragon was cast out, the old serpent called Devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Luke 10:18. And he said to them, I saw Satan fall from heaven like lightning. Now the restoration begins. Genesis 1:2. And the earth was without form. Now the apostolic Bible polyglot, which comes from the Septuagint, says the earth was unseen and unready, where a lot of versions say it was without form and void. So it was unseen and unready. And darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Ruach, the spirit of Eloah, moved upon the face of the waters. Now in the Septuagint, the word earth is gahe, and it means soil, by extension a region, or the solid part, or the whole of the terrene globe. Now, terrene globe just means of the global earth. So, the earth, the global earth, was made into darkness. Now, this word was is haya, and it means become, come to pass. It is rendered became or has become. Without form. To lie in waste, a desolation, that is desert, confusion, and has become without form and void. This is an undistinguishable ruin. So that goes along with what the apostolic says, that it's unready. It was an undistinguishable ruin. And darkness, misery, destruction, death, ignorance, sorrow, wickedness, dark, was upon the deep. Now deep means an abyss, a surging mass of water. And it tells us that it comes from H 1949 and to compare H 2000. So when we look at H 1949, it means to make an uproar or agitate greatly, to destroy. And H 2000 means to properly put into commotion, by implication to disturb, drive, destroy, break, consume, crush, trouble, vex. And then it says to look at H 1949, which we did, and H 1993. So H 1993 tells us to make a loud sound, like the English hum, so a loud humming noise, by implication to be in great commotion or tumult, to rage, war, moan, clamor, clamorous. And then water. And this word water in the Hebrew, it equates to dirty waters, urine, semen, piss, wasting water. So it's a dirty water. Thus, Genesis 1 verse 2 could read, "And the global earth, the earth, became an undistinguishable ruin and desolate. And misery, death, and sorrow was on the face of war. And the Ruach of Eloah, the Ruach HaKodesh, moved upon or restored the wasting." Because the earth could not become desolate unless it was in some other form than being desolate. So we can't become something unless we're something else. So this reading reasons that somewhere between the first two verses of Genesis, some terrible catastrophe must have occurred. Isaiah told us the earth was made to be inhabited, and Genesis 1:2 tells us there was all this destruction and darkness and waste. So something happened. And we believe that it was more than likely the apostasy of Hillel when he was thrown to the earth and caused this destruction. So Eloah sends his Ruach, the Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, to restore the earth so life could once again flourish there. Genesis 1 verse 3. Then Eloah said, "Let light be." And there was light. Recall that there was darkness and the earth could not be seen because of it. Then the Creator brings forth light. In the Hebrew, this word is or, meaning an illumination or luminary, bright, clear, day, light, morning, sun. And recall, once again, the angel with the seal in Revelation ascended from the morning sun. Genesis 1:4. And Eloah saw the light, that it was good, and Eloah separated between the light and the darkness. Verse 5. And Eloah called the light day, and he called the darkness night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. Therefore, the first day of restoration began and ended with the morning sun. The very first thing that the Creator does after the Ruach finishes the cleanup is brings forth the morning sun. The Messiah is also called the Son, the S-U-N, of righteousness in Malachi 4:2. Eloah then ends the first day with the subsequent sunrise, completing the first full cycle of the restored day. Days 2 and 3, the Creator separated the waters, wrapping the earth within a protective watery atmosphere and establishing the bodies of water that will support the aquatic life. The land surfaces were fashioned and made ready as well. By the end of the third day, the earth was fully dressed and prepared to support life. All that was left was for the animals and man to be set in place. Yet, before that placement happened, right in the middle of the creation week, Eloah sets his clock. Genesis 1:14. And Eloah said, "Let luminaries be in the expanse of the heavens to divide between day and night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years." Now the Hebrew word for signs, as we mentioned earlier, is oath, which means mark or evidence. The lexicon defines signs as signs and times. And the Hebrew word for seasons is, of course, moed, meaning an appointment, a fixed time, a festival. Given this understanding, then, Genesis 1:14 could read, "Let the lights be for signs of time, for evidence of time, marks of time, for the fixed time appointments to meet for festivals, and for Sabbath days and sabbatical years." Genesis 1:15, and let them be for luminaries in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, again on the terrene globe. And it was so. Verse 16, and Eloah made 2 great luminaries, the great luminary to rule the day, and the small luminary and the stars to rule the night. And Eloah set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide between the light and the darkness. And Eloah saw it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the 4th day. So up until now, the creation week had been all about the preparations to sustain life. Therefore, we can only assume that Eloh's clock holds some kind of life-sustaining factor. In Genesis 1, we are only told that the lights were to be the witnesses of time, but there is no breakdown here as to which light was given what duty of signs, seasons, days, or years. The Bible mostly tells us that the greater luminary is the sun, made for ruling the day, and the moon or lesser luminary and stars for ruling the night. So how do we know what light to use for numbering our days so we can find the true Sabbath? King Solomon can answer that for us. Let's go to Ecclesiastes 7, starting with verse 11. Wisdom is good with an allotment and abundance to the ones viewing the sun. Now, isn't that interesting? Wisdom is good with an allotment and an abundance. So we're allotted an abundance of wisdom when we view the sun. Okay, how do we view it? For wisdom in its shadow. So the wisdom that we find in allotment and abundance is the ones viewing the sun, and that wisdom is in its shadow, as the shadow is the shadow of silver. So there's riches, there's value in this shadow, in this wisdom that these shadows can bring. And the advantage of the knowledge of wisdom will restore to life the one having it. So, our life-sustaining factor is found in watching the greater luminary and understanding the shadows it casts and what that means. Verse 13, look at the work of Eloah, who can make straight which he has bent. So notice now that Solomon throws in this information about making straight what was bent. Obviously still talking about the sun and its shadows. He tells us this is the sign to watch so that we can have the restoration of life. The straight and bent shadows. Every day of the year, the shadow is a little different than the day before. The shadow is either a little straighter or a little more bent, depending on the day and the season. As the sun moves towards the solstice, its shadow becomes more and more bent each day, either to the north or to the south, depending on the season and hemisphere you live in. As the sun moves towards the equinoxes, the shadow becomes more straight. Solomon knew how to read the sun signs and understood the significance of that information. Only the Creator has control of the sun. It does not have arbitrary phases like the moon for which men can collaborate over. It is just a faithful witness running its course as the bridegroom across the heavens as spoken of in Psalms 19. Thus Eloah assigned it as the chief star to start counting our days from. The chief star. We know that Enoch puts the stars as the leaders over time. Thus, our own sun, being our closest star to us, would be in control of those chief days and those chief set times. So from one sunrise to the next, all of the days of our lives, man's years are numbered by his revolutions around the sun, not around the moon. And remember, remember that Hillel wanted to sit above the stars, again, which includes our own sun, and not above the moon. He doesn't say, I'm going to sit above the moon. He says, I'm going to sit above the stars. Malachi 4:2. And here we go again. But for you who fear my name, the Son of righteousness shall rise up, and healing shall be on his wings. And you shall go out and frisk like calves in a stall. Again, life, healing, all associated with the Son. And of course here the Son of righteousness, which is the Messiah. Moses was instructed to use the day of the dewy sunrise to align the building of the tabernacle on the first day of the second year in the wilderness. This is the day of the spring equinox, when the shadows of the sun are straight and not bent, allowing for the perfect east-west alignment of the tabernacle. All Moses had to do is set the center pole towards the sunrise, using it as one large transit to keep the tabernacle set while the frame goes up around it, which I talk about in my book, Wheels of Time, the Camp and the Tabernacle as Designed. So, per the instructions of our Creator, Moses and Aaron were counting the feast days from the due east rising, as it is the day the heavens started marking time. For Eloah said, this is for you the first day of the year. Enoch also confirms that east is first. Enoch 77:1. And the first quarter is called east because it is the first. He's talking about the first quarter of the calendar. When we start counting, the very first day is east. And it starts on the day that establishes east. This is the day of the due east sunrise, which projects the straight line shadow and none other. So how does this, as Solomon details, this straight line shadow of the sun restore life exactly? The Creator gave us this sign that is rich in wisdom so that we will never lose the blessed first Sabbath of creation. No matter how many crazy calendars Hillel inspires, for it is to be a memorial and the mark of his people. Remember, without the mark of the Sabbath, as per Eloah, one will perish, which is Hillel's plan, which is why he tries to confound it. This is the straightforwardness of our Creator's division of days. The Sabbath is simply 3 days after the sun rises due east. It really can't be more elementary than that. The Sabbath commandment is the only one that starts with the word remember, because it is a memorial to all Yahuwah's work during the first week. Therefore, the Sabbath is no different than any of the other annual memorials listed in Leviticus 23. The memorializing of the Sabbath is as annual as all other feasts. Only this one is done every 7th day for 52 Sabbaths each year. Then the cycle repeats. The books of Enoch and Jubilees profoundly instruct that the year is only 364 sunrises. 7 days per Genesis divides quite nicely into 364, giving us 52 Sabbaths each year. So what year is Jubilees referring to? It was certainly written long before the Gregorian and even the Julian calendars. Therefore, it could only be the year at the time of the Genesis account. The year as Adam and Enoch would have known it. The year that changed when the earth tilted in Noah's day by adding extra solar days to the 364. And we read about this tilt in Enoch 65 verse 1. So what I find interesting is that Enoch, who is seventh from Adam, was given this information so the end time generation would know how to restore the seventh day of Eloah. Enoch 1:1. The blessing of Enoch, with which he blessed the elect and the righteous, who would be present on the day of tribulation, at the time of the removal of all the wicked ones. Verse 2. And Enoch, the blessed and righteous man of Eloah, took up his parable while his eyes were open, and he saw and said, This is a holy, a Kodesh vision from the heavens, which the Malachim, which the angels showed me. And I heard from them everything, and I understood. I look not for this generation, but for the distant one that is coming. I speak about the elect ones and concerning them. And he says in verse 1, the elect ones are the ones that will be present on the day of tribulation. So this is about end times and restoring Yahweh's word. Throughout his writings, we are given calendrical instructions. Enoch describes the Genesis year in chapter 72 with the sun gates. And in chapter 82, he introduces us to the additional leaders over the days 365 and 366 that were set in place after the tilt. The placement of these additional days are also confirmed in the Dead Sea Scroll, number 4Q394, where the 12th month is mentioned. We're going to go to fragment 2, column 1, and it reads, On the 21st of it, a Sabbath. He's talking about the 12th month. On the 28th of it, a Sabbath. In addition to it, a day after the Sabbath and the second day. Note that the in addition after the Sabbath and the second day is talking about days 365 and 366 after the creation year of 364 days. Fragments 3 through 7, column 1. The 28th of it, a Sabbath. In addition to it are to be added, and the year is complete, 364 days. So counting 364 days from day 1 of creation falls on the 52nd Sabbath, which is the 28th day of the 12th month, when we number as instructed by Enoch, and just as the scroll confirms. Then the additional day, or days, are outside of the 364 leaders named by Enoch in chapter 82. These days are called Halo, Jasaph, and Asphael. Now both the names Jasaph and Aspha come from the same root as Joseph or Yosef, meaning he will add or augment it. So in other words, these are the two extra solar days that were now added to the end of all the other leaders of time. The instructions given is that the seventh counted day is a memorial to the Creator's work. On that day, we are to rest as he did. The church was not given the knowledge of the Creator's division of days and teaches that the 7-day count to mean that it is a continuous, uninterrupted count. Yet, if we count uninterrupted from cycle to cycle, then the Sabbath quickly becomes out of sync with creation itself. What is continuous and uninterrupted is the Sabbath's covenantal power. For it is the everlasting covenant between true worshipers and their Creator. Exodus 31:16, And the sons of Israel shall guard the Sabbath to observe them unto their generations. Verse 17, It is an eternal covenant with me and the sons of Israel, and it is an eternal sign. For in 6 days the Creator made the heaven and the earth, and on the 7th day he ceased and rested. Yahuwah lays out the pattern of his days at creation. By observing any other day, we put ourselves outside the promise and blessing of Yahuwah's day of rest. The Creator's true Sabbath shall be restored, as noted in Isaiah 66:23, where it says, "And it shall come to pass that from one Rosh Chodesh to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, says Yahuwah." The Sabbath has always been, is today, and forever shall be set aside and sanctioned by Yahuwah as his day of communion between mankind and himself. There is not a single verse in the entire Bible that declares that the Sabbath has ever been done away with or changed from the original pattern in Genesis. Long before any days were named after false gods, we were simply instructed to number them. But here is where the problem and deceptions lie. Scripture is always the framework for truth. Other inspired writings add the walls that strengthen the frame. Enoch is telling us that the Creator's division of days is based on a 364-day year. So let's work within that premise. If the dewy sunrise is the memorial of the fourth day of creation, then regardless of any other day, this is our anchor to creation and its Sabbath, because we know that 3 days later the Creator rested. It's pretty easy to count 3 sunrises, and we know that 3 days has biblical and spiritual implications as well. Due to the misunderstanding of the perpetual nature of the Sabbath, there are people who try to bend our Creator's division of days in order to satisfy their own understandings. Proverbs 3 verse 5, "Trust in Yahuwah with all your heart and lean not into your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths." Now, I'm not asking you to lean into my understanding either. All I present here is the Scripture's order of operation. Just the facts. Now, there are those who attempt to keep Sabbath a continuous count by using the named days on the Gregorian calendar. So, being a truth seeker, I wanted to explore the roots of Saturday Sabbath. First, let's understand that we are told to number our days, not name them after false gods. It was those very false gods that were the cause of the true Sabbath being taken away from the Jews to begin with. Now, shortly after leaving Egypt, the Israelites made a golden idol, and a false feast was declared to honor Yahuwah. "Tomorrow is the feast to Eloah," proclaimed Aaron, the brother of Moses. Now, this was not a true appointed feast of Yahuwah, but rather for the deity Saturn, for which the calf was a symbol. This feast took place on Saturn's day, which was the day the Egyptians worshipped their gods. This was the beginning of the Hebrews worshipping Saturn's day outside of the bondage of Egypt. So now we're going to fast forward to Amos, approximately 689 BC. And we again find the house of Israel keeping feasts other than the ones appointed by Yahuwah at Mount Sinai. Eloah is so angry and fed up with these false feasts that he condemns the whole house of Israel to the worship of the hosts of heaven, the tabernacle of Saturn which they had made, thus the false Saturday Sabbath. Amos 5, starting with verse 21. "I have detested, I have thrust away your holiday feast, and in no way shall I savor your festivals." Verse 25. "Have you brought near sacrifices and food offerings to me 40 years in the wilderness, O house of Israel?" Verse 26. "But you have borne the tabernacle of your god Molech, and Saturn, your images of the star of your god, which you made to yourselves." Now this word born, but you have borne up, so they The word is nasa in the Hebrew. And no, nasa does not mean deceived. Deceived is nashah. Nasa means to bear up, suffer, receive, but can also mean to marry, that is, to be intimate with. So basically, Yahuwah is saying, you were intimate with your star god, and you're not worshiping me. You're being intimate with them, not being intimate with me. Acts 7 verse 42. And this is their punishment. And Allah turned and delivered them up to serve, to worship the host of heaven, as it has been written in the book of the prophets. Did you not offer to me victims for slaughter and sacrifice for 40 years in the wilderness, O house of Israel? And you took up the tent of Molech, and the star of your god Saturn, the figures which you made in order to worship them. And I will remove you beyond Babylon. Back to Amos 5:4. For so says Yahuwah to the house of Israel, seek me and live. Verse 5. But do not seek Bethel, and do not enter Gilgal, and do not cross over Beersheba. For Gilgal is going into exile, and Bethel shall be for nothing. Seek Yahuwah and live, that he not break out like a fire on the house of Joseph to consume, and no one is putting it out for Bethel. So remember, the golden calf, Saturn, had once again been erected by Jeroboam in 1 Kings 12:25-33. We read about that. But this time, he had set them up in Bethel. He put one in Bethel and one in Dan. And Amos is stating that their Saturn god in Bethel cannot put out the fire that Yahuwah is sending upon the house of Joseph. That this god of Saturn has no power. He cannot put out the fire. So he goes on to say that it is Yahuwah which created the stars. So in other words, they were not to worship the creation of the stars, sun, moon, and 5 planets, but are to worship their creator. Amos declares that Israel had set up an idolatrous shrine and false feasts dedicated to Saturn. They were worshiping in the tabernacle of Saturn, declaring Saturn to be their king and star god. Acts 7 verse 38. This is he who was in the congregation in the wilderness, with the angel who spoke to him on Mount Sinai, and with our fathers, who received the living words to give to us. Verse 39. To whom our fathers would not be obedient, but thrust him away and turned back again to Egypt in their hearts. Verse 40, saying to Aaron, make gods for us who will lead the way for us. As for this Moses who led us out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what happened to him. Thus they made a calf in those days and offered sacrifice unto the idol and rejoiced in the work of their own hands. Then, some 800 years after the Exodus, the word of Yahuwah came to Ezekiel. He was commanded to bring charges against Israel for the sins of their forefathers, because they had not left the Egyptian idols behind, and they abolished Yahuwah's Sabbath and set time appointments from the get-go in the wilderness. Due to this abominable sin, Yahuwah cursed Israel with set time ordinances that would lead them and their children to death and not to life. So, still some 800 years after the Exodus, the Israelites were still not following the proper Sabbaths. Then I said to them, each of you get rid of the abominable images that you have set your eyes on, and do not defile yourselves with the idols of Egypt. I am Yahuwah your Eloah. And they revolted from me, and wanted not to listen to me. Each threw not away the abominations of their eyes, and the practices of Egypt they abandoned not. And I spoke and poured out my rage upon them, to complete my anger among them, in the midst of Egypt. But I did not, since that would have brought dishonor to my name. For in the presence of the people among whom they were living, I had announced to Israel that I was going to lead them out of Egypt. So I brought Israel out of Egypt and led them into the wilderness and gave them my orders, and I made known my ordinances to them, how if a man should do them, he shall live by them. So the word orders, which I think I could probably do a whole study on just this word orders, because it's kind of fascinating to me, because in the Hebrew it's kupa. Now a kupa is a sukkah, sukkah, which covers. So these orders symbolically or spiritually cover us. The kupa, it's our Creator's covering, his kupa. So orders, kupa, the Hebrew 2708, and it means appointed, set time, customs. So I gave them my appointed set times, my customs, and made known mine ordinances. This word ordinances is mishpat, Hebrew 49:41, and it means divine law and ceremonies. So I made known my divine law, my ceremonies to them, and how if a man should do them, he shall live by them. Ezekiel 20:12, and my Sabbaths I gave to them for a sign between me and between them, for them to know that I am Yahweh, the one sanctifying them. And the house of Israel greatly embittered me in the wilderness. In my appointed set time orders they did not go, and my divine law and my ordinances they thrust away, which a man shall do them and shall live by them, and they profaned my Sabbaths exceedingly. And I spoke to pour out my rage upon them in the wilderness, to completely consume them. So the Most High is furious because Israel isn't following his laws and appointed times. Ezekiel 20:15, and I lifted my hand against them in the wilderness, the thorough one, to not bring them into the land which I gave to them, the land flowing milk and honey. The honeycomb is beyond all the land. Verse 16, because they thrust away my divine law, and in my set appointments they went not by them, and they profaned my Sabbaths, and they went after the thoughts of their own hearts. Now the King James translates this as, their heart went after their idols. So they profaned the Sabbath. This word profaned is halal, H2490, and it means to dissolve, to break one's word. And the Israelites had promised at the foot of Mount Sinai to follow all that Yahweh had instructed. But almost immediately, they broke that promise. Ezekiel 20, verse 17, and my eye spared them to not wipe them away, and I did not commit them unto consumption in the wilderness. Now the next verse gives warning to the new generation of Israel, a warning not to practice the set time statutes that their fathers had observed in honoring their idols. Ezekiel 20:18, but I said unto their children in the wilderness, walk not in the statutes of your fathers, neither observe their ceremonies, nor defile yourselves with their idols. So, in the Hebrew, this word statutes is kok, H2706, and it means an appointment, set time, convenient custom. Convenient custom. So do not walk in the convenient customs of your father, nor observe their ceremonies, nor defile yourself with their idols. The one excuse that we hear the most for not being able to follow our Creator's calendar is how hard it is to get days off during the beast's work week. So many do what is convenient. As long as they are observing a day, their conscience is clear. But the Most High isn't having it. Now, years ago, we met with a couple who had questions about the calendar. And as we went through the days of assembly, we spoke about the Rosh Chodesh. the head of each month, explaining to them that this day was also a set-aside day. And their reaction was, "Not another day off. That just won't work with our schedule." Now they observe Saturday as Sabbath because it works with their schedule. And if asked, they would tell you, it is the day that the Jews do. So weren't they the chosen people? And I hear that a lot about Jewish Saturday. They're the chosen people. But first, we need to understand that the chosen are called Israel and not Jew or Jewish. And in order to be part of Israel, we must live by his set time appointments, not the customs of those still under his sentence. Ezekiel 20:19. I am Yahuwah your Eloah. Go by my orders, my set time appointments, and keep my ordinances, my divine laws, and do them. And my Sabbaths, sanctify them. And it will be a sign between me and you to know that I am Yahuwah your Eloah. See, they weren't looking at Yahuwah as their Eloah. They were looking at these idols from Egypt. Saturn was who their God was. Ezekiel 20:21. And they rebelled against me. And their children went not by my orders, not by my ordinances. They guarded not to do them. Which if a man does them, he shall live by them. And my Sabbaths they profaned. And I spoke to pour out my rage upon them, and to complete my anger against them in the wilderness. And I turned my hand against them and acted because of myself, so that my name should not be thoroughly profaned before the nations, from whom I led them out of. Verse 23, and I lifted up my hand against them in the wilderness to disperse them among the nations and scatter them in the places, because they did not observe my ordinances, and they thrusted away my orders and profaned my Sabbaths, and their eyes were after the thoughts of their fathers. So even these latter generations, they just weren't getting it. And so I gave them up to orders. I gave them up to set appointed times that were not good, and ordinances, divine laws, customs that lead to death. Wow. So these scriptures very plainly show that right from the beginning, keeping the true Sabbaths and set time appointments was a problem for the Hebrews. They were very quick to abolish his beautiful meetings that led them into his presence, into life, instead of choosing the dead idols of Egypt, which led to death. This always blows me away, that after all they witnessed and promised to do at the Mount of Sinai, and I try to imagine it, what it would have been like that day in the awe of it all, and to be in that presence and to feel that ruach across the camp. And I couldn't even imagine how that would feel. And then just to toss it aside, because it was new and it was different, and we couldn't see this God, and we needed a God we could see so we could worship it, because this was the unseen God. Wow. So the Hebrews from the time of Exodus into Amos, Nehemiah, and Ezekiel's time offered their sacrifices not to Yahuwah, but to their wandering star god, Saturn. They worshipped in the tabernacle of Saturn, declaring Saturn to be their king and God. Thus Yahuwah delivers them up to Mary, that is to be intimate with and serve the host of heaven, Saturn, therefore suffering the consequences. Now this sentence has never been lifted to this day. Now the Jews called the planet Saturn by the name Shabbat. This has confused some to think that this Hebrew word for Saturn is equivalent to the seventh day of creation, the true Sabbath of the Bible. Even before the rise of Christianity, the Romans, aware that the Jews rested every 7 days, attributed this to the role played in their religion by Saturn, and referred to the Jewish Sabbath as Saturn's Day, therefore known as the Sabbath of Saturn. In Histories 5.2, Tacitus was considered one of the greatest Roman historians from 56 to 120 AD, and he writes of the Jewish Sabbath, quote, "We are told that the 7th day was a mark of respect to Saturn." The Jews identified Saturn, or Kronos in the Greek, as the Semitic El, which is short for Loa. Now the Greeks recognized Kronos as the Phoenician god of time, or El Olam, which would be rendered Olamus in the Greek. So by the 2nd century in Rome, the day when the Jews celebrated the Sabbath was called Saturnae Dies, and eventually Saturday in English. This is why the Messiah untied the Sabbath of the Jewish leaders in an attempt to return them to the old ways and the Father's proper set times. He spoke of the old ways that had been lost to them. And Paul lamented for his kinsmen, but rejoiced for the Goyim, for the nations who were given the truth about the Sabbath. That it is not merely the children born through natural descent who are regarded as Yahweh's children, but it is the children born through the promise who were regarded as descendants. So the idea of chosenness, therefore, is independent of consideration of lineage, but is directly related to our response to Eloh's promise. Being Israel is not a static title, it is a designation. And those accepting the covenant is the true Israel at large. These are the ones that Peter refers to as a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession. 1 Peter 2:9. Both Hebrew and Goyim, Jew and Gentile, can be Israel through the promise. Jubilees 1:7-14. Moshe is now told how the people will forsake Yahweh in the land of promise. You must write for yourself all these words, which I make known to thee this day, for I know their rebelliousness and their stubbornness, before I will lead them into the land which I have sworn to their fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, to your seed I will give this land which flows with milk and honey. Then they will eat and be satisfied, but they will turn to strange gods, to those who cannot save them from their affliction. But this testimony will be heard as testimony against them, for they will forget all of my commandments, everything which I will command them. They will walk after the Gentiles, after the nations, and after the defilement and shame. They will serve their gods, and these will become for them an offense, an affliction, a torment, and a snare. Many will be destroyed and taken captive. They will fall into the hands of the enemy, because they have deserted my ordinances and my commandments, and the annual festivals of my covenant, and my weekly Sabbaths, which I have sanctified, separated, set apart for myself among them. Wow. They have deserted the annual festivals and weekly Sabbaths of Yahweh's covenant from the very beginning. Jubilees 6:34. And all the children of Israel will forget, and will not find the path of the years, and will forget the renewals, the monthly Kodeshes, and the seasons, the Moed appointed times and the feasts, and the Shabbats. Verse 35, and they will go wrong as to the order of the years, to the Jubilees. For I know, and from henceforth I will declare it unto thee. And it is not of my own devising, for the book lies written before me, and on the heavenly tablets the division of days is ordained, lest they forget the feasts of the covenant. The feasts of the covenant. The doorposts where we put the awl through our ear, so we can never leave his covenant, his doorway, be his bondservant, and walk according to the feast of the Gentiles, the false Sabbaths, the false holidays like Christmas and Easter, Halloween, after their error and after their ignorance. Jubilees 50, 1-5. Then I made you understand the days of the weeks, the Sabbaths, in the wilderness of sin between Elam and Sinai, and I related to you the Sabbaths of the land on Mount Sinai. Also the years of Jubilee in the Sabbaths of years I related to you. But its exact year, the exact year of the Jubilee, I have not related to you until you enter the land which you will possess. Then the land will keep its Sabbaths. When they dwell upon it, they will know the year of Jubilee. Well, they have to own land, be able to let land rest. So they weren't given the sabbatical and the Jubilees to rest the land until they actually had land. There are still 40 years before you for learning the commandments of Eloah until we cross the border of the land of Canaan, crossing the Jordan on the western side. Thus Jubilees will pass until Israel is purified from all the sins of fornication. Wow. The Israelites wandered for 40 years, and because of her continued disobedience and fornication with their idols, the ecclesia has now wandered through that same wilderness, without knowledge of the proper appointed times of Yahuwah. Now, is this a salvational issue? Absolutely. Because meeting with Yahuwah at the correct time is his mark placed upon his people. Yahuwah gave his division of days to man through the scriptures, inspired writings like Enoch, Jubilees, historic accounts as found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and by the natural order of the movement of the heavens. Yet, as written in Jubilees, Yahuwah knew his people would still mess it up. This is why we must deprogram and reboot our minds away from the Greek way of thinking and return back to the simplicity of Yahuwah's creation. If we once again become in tune with nature, the way Yahuwah ordained it, we will live in harmony with his word and be in his set times. Throughout the scriptures, we are instructed to memorialize different events. The Passover, for example, is a reenactment year after year on its fixed 14th day of the first month. And so it is with the Sabbath, a reenactment of the first. And as Numbers 10:10 told us, not only a reenactment, but a memorial. Now, the problem with trying to keep the Gregorian Saturday as always being Sabbath is that this throws the original Sabbath out of its creation sequence. The names on the Gregorian week wander through the numbered days. Your birth date is a perfect example of this. The date of your birth never changes, but the named day of the week it falls on from year to year does. So it is with the Sabbath. The numbered day never changes. Genesis 2:2-3 sets the tone and establishes the first reason for Sabbath keeping. We are to follow his example, because he specifically rested on the seventh day of creation. The Sabbath has universal validity. It doesn't belong to the Jews. It belongs to everyone, and is an example from creation, not from one of the patriarchs, nor from Moses, nor from the Jews, as I said, because there was no Jews in the beginning. Just his people. David found favor with Eloah and asked that he might procure a dwelling place for him. it was Solomon which built the house. However, the Most High does not live in houses made by men, as the prophets say, Isaiah 66 verse 1, so says Yahweh, heaven is my throne, the earth the footstool of my feet. Where then is the house that you built for me? And where is the place of my rest? He's asking this question because his place of rest had already been created by himself in the beginning. It belonged to the seventh day. The seventh day, not just a seventh day, and without doubt, Exodus 20, verses 8 through 11, shows that the keeping of it as a day of worship has its foundation firmly anchored in Genesis 1 and 2. At the end of the creation sequence, Yahweh created and sanctified an environment that would play a major role in producing eternal and everlasting life. Through the creation of the Sabbath, Yahweh shows that the life-producing process is not completed with just the physical environment. The Sabbath plays an important role in producing spiritual life, a quality of life having a dimension that the physical alone cannot supply. Toward this end, no other day can be devoted to the Sabbath's quality of significance. There is a valid reason for this. The Sabbath is not merely an afterthought of a tremendous creation, but a deliberate memorializing of the most enduring thing man knows, time. The Sabbath memorializes the first week of creation and sets the cycle until the first week comes around again in its cyclic trek. The Creator's timepiece is very simple to use. In the very first book of the Bible, we are given the framework for a week, 7 days. This is the very first thing we learn. We learn within that week that the lights in the heavens were given duties for tracking the set times of the Most High. So far, pretty simple. It is through other historical writings that we come to understand how the priests were taught to use the lights. The Dead Sea Scrolls, for example, confirm that the priests used the due east rising of the sun to start the counting of the annual feasts. They believed the due east rising of the sun was the mark given the greater luminary on the day that time was set into motion in the heavens. This fourth day sign also confirmed that the first Sabbath would be in 3 days. What a blessing we were given to know the first Sabbath! But see how Hillel, how Satan has deceived the masses by changing the times of the Most High, just as Scripture told us he would. Yet there are those who desire to understand our Creator's division of days, but confound it with man-made systems. We see some who are teaching that once the dewy sunrise is established, that we wait for the next Wednesday, or in some cases the closest Wednesday to the dewy sunrise, to start the yearly count of the feasts, doing the priesthood a disservice by calling this the Zadokite calendar, proclaiming that the Dead Sea Scrolls confirms that the Gregorian Wednesday is the 4th day, thus keeping the day called Saturday aligned to the 7th day of creation. They try to follow, perhaps unknowingly, in the footsteps of those who were given over to set days that led to death in the tabernacle of Saturn. Our Creator gave his set times to Adam, Enoch, Noah, Moses, Aaron, David, and Solomon, although Solomon threw them aside due to the influences of his wives, and all the prophets after them. None of them would have known what a Wednesday even was. I mean, can you imagine a conversation between our Creator and Moses on Mount Sinai? And here's Yahweh saying, Moses, this is how you will never lose the creation Sabbath. Watch for the due east rising of the great fireball I place in the heavens. This is for you to use as a marker. Then wait. Moses, looking kind of surprised, wait? Wait for what, Eloah? And Yahuwah says, wait for Wednesday, Moses. And Moses says, what is a Wednesday, Eloah? And Yahuwah says, something man will create in a couple thousand years. Now, I know I'm being silly, but I really don't think that's how any conversation went. Do you? It's pretty ridiculous when you really think about it. When we wait in order to keep the Sabbath on a certain named day, it removes it from its celestial, fixed seventh day given at creation. They argue that the calendar based on creation disrupts the Sabbath's seventh-day cycle. Hence, they take control of the Sabbath like their forefathers did in the wilderness. There is only one cycle of creation, where our Creator blessed the first seventh day as the day of rest, and every seventh day throughout the first cycle, to be repeated cycle after cycle. If we carry the counting over into the new creation cycle without letting creation set the Sabbath, then we will have the Sabbath showing up on the sixth day of creation, then the fifth day of creation, then the fourth, moving backwards through the days. Now, we have been tracking the days via the heavenly lights for years. And what I have come to know is that the first Sabbath has not moved from the counted day that falls on the Gregorian March 23rd. This has been so since we started applying the creation count. It has not ever changed from that. Using the memorial of the due east rising of the sun to anchor us to day 4 of creation. It's just so simple. Now, some calendar people will start counting the feasts on the day after East is established, therefore making East last and not first, as we're told it's to be. And then they will add an additional sunrise into the creation week in order to harmonize the solar cycle of 365.24 days with the Enochian Jubilee premise of 364 days. So the creation year was 364 days. Now we have a solar cycle that has to be reckoned within that. The solar cycle of 365.24 days. Right? So what is actually happening, though, is this causes the Sabbath to fall on the 8th sunrise and not the 7th. So when they create this pause day, they call it a pause day
or some call it the abominable day in reference to Job. Now, how can day 4 of creation be an abominable day?
In all actuality, this causes the Sabbath to fall on the 8th sunrise and not the 7th. But if asked, this seems not to be a problem because I'm told that one of the days isn't counted. But there is a problem. We cannot ignore a sunrise a whole day. Nowhere in Scripture is an extra day mentioned or even hinted at during the first week. 7 sunrises, starting with, then Eloah said, let light be, and there was light, through to the 7th sunrise, which is the day we rest. Both the Sabbath and the festal counts can be anchored for us by the 4th day confirmation. If we anchor our counting on any other day than the one that establishes East, we would be disrupting the counting of the Creator's appointments. The Sabbath is not tied to Saturn or any other day other than that established at creation. Come out of her, my people. Come out of the man-made dogma and traditions. Our Creator made it simple to find His 7th day memorial, which is the mark of His people. Now, obedience does not go unrewarded. As most of the world suffers trials and difficulties because of its carnal ways, blessings and protection are promised to those who keep the Sabbath. Jeremiah 17, verses 24 and 25. And it shall come to pass, if you diligently hearken unto me, says Yahweh, to bring in no burden through the gates of this city on the Sabbath day, but hallow the Sabbath day to do no work therein. Then shall there enter into the gates of this city kings and princes sitting upon the throne of David, riding in chariots and on horses, and this city shall remain forever. Isaiah 56:2 confirms Jeremiah's words. Blessed is the man that keeps the Sabbath from polluting it. This undeniable truth is the beauty of doing what Yahweh commands. He rewards us richly for doing so. When we offend him, adverse consequences are just as sure. Jeremiah 17:27. And it will be, if you should not hearken to me and sanctify the day of the Sabbaths, to lift no burdens, and to not enter through the gate of Jerusalem in the day of the Sabbaths, then I will kindle a fire in her gates, and I shall devour the plazas of Jerusalem, and it shall not be extinguished. It does not matter what career we have chosen. The Sabbath is still binding. Nehemiah shows that regular business transactions, buying and selling, are forbidden on the Sabbath. But simply refraining from our daily work on the Sabbath is not all that Yahweh requires of us. Our attitudes as well as our response to obeying his will are of great importance. If we keep from working on the Sabbath, but yearn for the next day where we can seek riches, profit, or fun, the prophet Amos calls us sinners. The same is true of using the Sabbath as a holiday to read profane material, to gather for purely social reasons, to attend sporting events, or to seek any pleasure. If we use the Sabbath for these purposes, we are not obeying Yahweh's decree. Isaiah gives us clear instructions for the Sabbath day and blessings that will be poured out for obedience. Isaiah 58:13, if you turn your foot away because of the Sabbath from doing what you please on my holy days, and call the Sabbath a delight, to the holiness of Yahweh glorified, and shall glorify him to the holiness of not doing your own ways, from finding your own pleasures or speaking your own words. The prophet Ezekiel wrote about the importance of Yahweh's decrees. If we truly wish to follow Yahweh's will, how we worship him is just as crucial as when we meet with him to do so. Our actions have holy effects. They must be in tune with the Creator's master plan. Consider a few of the many examples from Scripture showing that when Yahweh prescribes a certain action, he expects nothing less than complete obedience. We were blessed with the word of our Creator, giving us an anchor from the beginning, the due east sunrise, memorializing the fourth day of creation, so that we would never lose the first Sabbath of creation in order to keep his word pure. Baruch Hashem. So this is the end of our study, Numbering the Sabbath, and I pray that it has edified you in showing where the correct Sabbath can be found, where the Sabbath of creation is located, and how simply it is to find, so we can be in the proper appointed times and not fall under the curse of Hallel. So we can find those blessings and receive them as we obey our Creator's commandment in guarding the true and one Sabbath. And as always, if you have questions, you can reach us at remnantofthelight remnantofthelight@gmail.com and our website, remnantofthelight.net. Don't forget to like and share. And until we meet again, I'm going to wish you Shalom. Shalom.
Shalom, shalom.